This is the Unique Scotland podcast with exclusive scottishvisits.co.uk.
Hello, this is John Harbour and welcome to Unique Scotland, the go-to podcast on all things Scottish. And I'm delighted to have you with me for this third episode of a tour around Scotland's largest city, Glasgow, especially on its 850th birthday this year. I'm dedicating this Glasgow City tour to the American Scottish Foundation, who have coordinated once more the amazing Tartan Week in New York. And I was there last Saturday, 5th of April, marching up 6th Avenue with a few thousand other Scots and Scottish diaspora, all in kilts and being jollied along with the sound of bagpipes from the wonderful bands such as the Atholl Highlanders and even the Oban School Pipe Band. They were just marvellous. Perhaps I'll share a little more of my time in the Big Apple later. But now back to Glasgow, where we've been having a bit of a heat wave. The temperatures got up to 18 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees Fahrenheit last week, when it was a bit chilly, 11 degrees or 54 degrees Fahrenheit in New York. And this morning I had Minnie out for her walk down Aberlady Bay, and it was mild with a wee bit of drizzle and rain. Well, in the last episode, number 2, we left Glasgow Green and headed down towards the River Clyde, then west through the centre of the city again and over to the ancient University of Glasgow. If you haven't listened to this episode, then don't worry, you can catch it another time, as they all stand on their own. And as we come down University Avenue, I'm taking advantage of my grandson, Oliver, who is studying at the university, to pick his brains on a couple of ideas for pubs and restaurants in the area, so we'll hear from him shortly. So in this third episode on Glasgow City, we'll pick up where we left off, just coming to the end of University Avenue and arriving at Byers Road. You will hear about the Clockwork Orange underground and railway system, which is the third oldest underground system in the world. And I'll tell you about the Glasgow Tower that earned the Guinness World Record for its ability to be rotated 360 degrees in the presence of wind. And we'll be visiting a couple of the 20 art galleries and museums that adorn Glasgow, which have some of the most eminent collection of arts and historical antiques of Europe. I've also taken quite a few photos of Glasgow, so have a look on my podcast page of the website, exclusivescottishvisits.co.uk, to see some of the sights of the city. And I've also been posting on Facebook page and Instagram, and the short videos of Glasgow on my YouTube channel. In fact, if you search for the American Scottish Foundation, I've done a tour of Glasgow for that organisation as well. Well, there's lots more of this wonderful city to see, so wherever you are in the world, I would now like you to relax and join me on this third and final episode of a panoramic tour of Glasgow City. We've just come to the bottom of University Avenue and heard some fascinating tales of the men to whom university buildings are dedicated. Incredible how some survived the awfulness of the First World War at places such as Ypres. Well, we turn right at this junction onto Byers Road, and I wouldn't be surprised if you've already heard of this road, because it's become a thriving student area with many pubs and restaurants, and somewhere I sometimes head for if I'm looking for a meal. Indeed, Byers Road, it's a mix of commercial, shopping and upmarket residential areas with largely traditional sandstone tenements, and they normally have the flats above and some retail premises on the ground floor. The road originally ran through a relatively rural area called Byers of Patrick and was also known as Bishop's Byers, probably referring to the cow sheds locally. And before the area was taken into Greater Glasgow area, the street's name was actually Victoria Street, but on joining, there was already a Victoria Street, so it was renamed to reflect its rural past. Many local lanes have benefited from the businesses of Byers Road and now contain a variety of small businesses themselves, from tapas bars to second-hand record stores. And the most famous of these is Ashton Lane, which I would recommend that you look out for because it contains bars, restaurants and a small cinema. The whole area is quite magical and a good stopping place for eateries with atmosphere. To give some authenticity to this podcast, I decided to tap into the local population to give us an insight into some of the local bars and restaurants. Then I remembered that my grandson, Oliver, is at Glasgow University, studying engineering, so I gave him a call to get his take on some of his haunts for drinking and eating. Hi Oliver, how are you doing?
Not bad, thank you. How are you?
I'm not bad at all. And tell me, how's the course going?
Course is not bad, Grandad. Yeah, it's getting on fine.
And you're doing an engineering course, of course, is it civil engineering?
Yes, civil engineering at the University of Glasgow.
You got your exams coming up shortly, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got a few at the end of this month. Got some mathematics and thermodynamics coming up.
Mathematics and aerodynamics or just dynamics?
Just dynamics.
Just dynamics, as if I would know anything about it. Sounds marvellous. A bit scary, if nothing else. Now, how does an Edinburgh lad, because of course you're from Edinburgh, find Glasgow? Well,
it's quite different from sort of the cobbled streets of Edinburgh, but it's got its own sort of quirks and lovely bits to it. It's a lot more modern than Edinburgh, I'd say, but it's equally as good.
Lovely. And one of the reasons for ringing you today was just to ask on your advice on pubs and restaurants in Glasgow. Give us a few if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, of course. Well, there's a lovely little cosy pub in the West End called Kitty O'Shea's. It's an Irish pub. That's great for some drinks in the evening. We've got Brel off Byers Road. It's got a lovely beer garden for a sunny day.
Yeah, Brel. How do you spell that, Oliver?
B-R-E-L, Brel.
Okay, sounds good.
We've also got the Finniston. It's a lovely little pub that does some good foods down in Finniston.
Yes.
That's a lovely place to go. It's got a beer garden as well. And we also have a place right where I stay, which is called Brewhouse, which is where part of the movie Trainspotting was filmed, which is quite a famous movie filmed in Scotland. Remember
it well. Brilliant film, Trainspotting. And I remember you took us to a nice restaurant one evening as well. Where was that?
Yeah, so there's quite a few lovely restaurants. There's one near Byers Road that's called Kapow. That's a really lovely restaurant, sort of like Asian-style tapas dishes.
Yeah.
And there's a lovely Mexican down in Finniston called El Jefe's.
Oh, El Jefe's. You took us there, I remember. That was great.
Yeah, there's some great live music and mariachi bands if you want to go there.
Yes, I remember I could hardly hear ourselves think with the Mexican band that was playing that night. It was fantastic. Yeah. Anything else?
That's all I can really think of right now.
Great. You're obviously heading back to Glasgow this evening. You're across in Edinburgh just for the day.
Yes, I will be heading back tonight.
Well, listen, I won't hold you up. Better get away and catch that train. But lovely to chat to you. Thank you so much for your advice. And look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. And very best of luck with the exams.
Thank you very much. I'll see you soon. Speak to you soon.
Take care, mate. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was my grandson Oliver, who's studying at the University of Glasgow. And he did well, considering I caught him on the hop by making a quick phone call. Thank you so much, Oliver, for your recommendations, and I'm sure some of my listeners will have taken notes just in case they visit Glasgow in the near future. Well, from University Avenue, we turn right onto Byers Road, and immediately on your left-hand side, as you turn, you will see the Tennant's Bar. It's a popular traditional bar which has gained a reputation as the place to go for a traditional boozer feel, to quote the pub's website. Now just think, a dark wood-panelled bar, hanging lights and retro seating. And if you're looking for somewhere to watch sport, then the bar has both BT and Sky Sports. It's somewhere you'll find locals on a Saturday watching the big match, which refers in Scotland mainly to football or soccer for my American friends. There's been a pub here since 1888, established by a Mr. Hugh Tennant Jr. and named after the famous Tennant's Brewery that was established by his grandfather Hugh Tennant in 1740. Now, Hugh Tennant Jr. had an interesting life, and it wasn't until he died in 1919 that a dark family secret came out. It appears that he was married with a family of 11 children to Rebecca Whaley, and also had a mistress, Ellen Clark, with whom he'd had another 4 children. A very busy man. It caused quite a scandal at the time, and if you're interested you can read more about the court cases which tried to contest the will in favour of his mistress's children. Anyway, we continue up Byers Road until you come to a sign on the right-hand side with an orange S in the middle and the name Subway on the side of the building. And this is Glasgow's Underground. Effectively, it's a light metro system which opened in 1896 and is the third oldest underground metro system in the world, after the London Underground of 1863 and the Budapest metro of all things in 1896. The construction is a simple circular loop of almost 6.5 miles long, and it travels to both the north and south of the River Clyde. Locally, the subway is known as the Clockwork Orange because of the colour of the carriages. Just beyond the subway is an 18th century 2-storey cottage-type building and is an alehouse called the Curler's Rest, formerly the Curler's Tavern, and it's the oldest pub in Byers Road. It's said that a tavern has been situated in this site since the 1600s, when this part of the city was still countryside and a large pond was close by. In the winter, the pond used to freeze over and people from all over Scotland would come here to play curling. You know, that game where the players use large, round, heavy pieces of smooth granite to glide along the ice and try to get nearest to the centre of a circle at the other end of the ice rink. So that's how the name The Curler's Tavern came about. It is also said that the tavern was visited by King Charles II of Scotland, but you'll have to use your imagination and think back to when this pub was situated on a lonely highway leading into medieval Glasgow. Apparently, it was a cold winter's day in 1662, and the tavern was closed until the landlord heard the cry, "Open up in the name of the King!" And sure enough, the landlord, who was quick to spy an excellent PR opportunity, opened the doors to King Charles II, whose appreciation was shown by granting a royal charter allowing the tavern to remain open day and night in perpetuity. And you'll see that at the front of the building there's 3 doors which used to lead into 3 different bars within the tavern. A lounge bar, a small snug bar, and upstairs a banqueting hall. Well, today it's now a traditional style pub with gastro-pub food, and the last time I popped in I had one of their traditional beef rib, shin and brisket pies cooked in a rich red wine sauce topped with light pastry. It was yummy. And talking about good food, just up from the Curler's Rest on the left-hand side is the artisan eatery called Valeria, where I enjoyed a fabulous lunch with one of my good friends recently. I had a lovely crispy duck salad and some patisseries to finish. It's just got to be done. Well, continue up Byers Road, and at the top on the right-hand side is an old church. But this is not any old church, and I'm going to keep the pub theme going here because it's a converted church now called Armadillo More. The Armadillo More was originally built in 1862 for the Free Church of Scotland in a neo-Gothic style, with a fabulously tall pyramid-styled spire. By the late 1970s, the congregation had dwindled and 2 parishes were merged, leaving this building redundant. In 2002, it was converted and turned into an arts and leisure centre, with it being renamed Armadillo More, which in Gaelic means the big song or the great melody of life. Inside is a spacious bar upstairs and a theatre club downstairs. And there's a fabulous painted ceiling by Alistair Gray and some wonderful stained glass windows by John Clark, who also contributed to the stained glass windows in the cathedral. I have to say I like the Armadillo More and have attended a number of theatrical events there. The venue is particularly well known for the Pie, Pint and a Play production, and that's exactly what you get when you buy a ticket. They tend to be daytime events, and when you arrive you get a meat pie, a pint of beer and sit down to enjoy a play. And I've spent many a happy afternoon there with one of my good friends and fellow Blue Badge guides, John Duthie, who introduced me to the Armadillo More. Highly recommended if you're in Glasgow. Well, from Armadillo More we continue onto the lights and turn left onto Great Western Road, which is the longest straight road in Glasgow at 3 miles from St George's Cross to Annie's Land Cross, and it's Scotland's second longest A road at 167 miles, with the A9 on the east coast being the longest. And parts of this road were actually built by General George Wade, known as the military roads, to improve troop movement around Scotland during the Jacobite uprising in the early mid-1700s. And another famous engineer, Thomas Telford, was involved in building later sections in the mid-1800s. As we turned left, you may have seen the Botanic Gardens on the right-hand side. Sadly, we can't see much from the road other than a large green space with the view protected by trees lining the park. The Botanic Gardens were originally sited in Sauchiehall Street, created in 1817 as an arboretum and public park, and moved here in 1939 to take advantage of cleaner air. Of course, the huge volumes of traffic trundling down the Great Western Road today was not a problem back then, when this area would have been open green space. It also used to have a railway line, and the old derelict station can still be seen inside. These Botanic Gardens are well known for their famous Kibble Palace, which is a large curved wrought iron glasshouse designed by John Kibble in 1860 and houses a great collection of orchids and other tropical plants. Well, we continue down this road until we come to Hindland Road and then turn left. On the corner on the right-hand side, you will see a luxury hotel called 1 Devonshire Gardens, officially known as Hotel du Vin at 1 Devonshire Gardens. And this luxury hotel is created from a terrace of 5 townhouses constructed in the 1870s. It is superb and is now owned by the Hotel du Vin chain, well, that is April 2025, and Gordon Ramsay, the famous Hell's Kitchen chef, used to run the hotel restaurant. I understand that when Kylie Minogue stays in Glasgow, this is her favourite hotel. The reason for coming down Hindland Road is to let you see some excellent examples of early 20th century tenement design. The architects at the time were bounded by certain architectural features, and they are, in their own way, beautiful red sandstone tenements, 4 stories high with slated roofs. And if you're visiting this street or looking at the street on Google Maps, then stop at one of the doors and have a look at the glass surrounds, lovely stained glass windows. Well, there's also a couple of imposing churches down this road, and on the left-hand side you'll find St Bride's Episcopal Church. Look up to see the statue of St Bridget, who is one of Ireland's patron saints. The original church was of wooden construction and established in 1891 in the adjacent street called Beaconsfield Road. Apparently, the church was put on wheels and towed to Hindland, so this red sandstone church, which replaced the wooden one, actually dates from around 1915. A little further on, you'll come to Hindland Parish Church, which was designed by the celebrated architect William Leiper. There are also some exquisite stained glass windows by another famous Scot, Douglas Strachan, from 1921, who was also responsible for some of the cathedral stained glass. Continue down Hindland Road, which flows onto Highborough Road, and you eventually come back to Byers Road with the Tennant Pub on the left-hand side. Turn right and continue down Byers Road until the road forks to the left into Church Street. Continue to the end and then turn left onto Dumbarton Road. And as you drive along this road, you'll pass over the Partick Bridge with the Kelvin River flowing underneath. And you'll recall from my last podcast that the River Kelvin is named after William Thomson, 1st Baron Kelvin, who was responsible for discovering the Kelvin temperature scale. Just after the bridge, you'll come to Kelvin Hall, a large red sandstone building on the right-hand side. And I recall visiting this hall when it was the Transport Museum a few years ago, but that's now moved to the Riverside Museum, which we'll be seeing shortly anyway. The Kelvin Hall is now a mixed-use arts and sports centre with a number of organisations coming together to get good use out of this building. Just along from the Kelvin Hall, you'll see an even larger and more impressive red sandstone building on the left-hand side, and this is Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum. It's superb, and I've whiled away many an hour looking at the museum's artefacts or one of the priceless paintings in the art wing. The construction of Kelvin Grove was partly financed by the proceeds of the 1888 International Exhibition held in Kelvin Grove Park, just to the right of the museum as you look at it. And I've had many a happy stroll around this vast expanse of park, and a wee picnic on a sunny day is a must. Now, before I talk about the museum, let me explain the International Exhibition. And you have to imagine an exhibition of science, art and industry, but on a huge scale. The main aim of the exhibition was to draw international attention to the city's scientific achievements and its industry during the Industrial Revolution. One of its aims was to help fund a much-needed art gallery and museum and a school of art in the city. There were many exhibits in the park, but the centrepiece was a main building which had a dome some 170 feet high, erected on an iron framework covered in galvanised sheet iron. 4 octagonal supporting towers around the dome were made of brick, with minarets on top. It was extraordinary. One of the exhibits was the amazing Doulton Fountain, the largest terracotta fountain in the world, and we saw that in the first podcast on Glasgow Green, near the People's Palace. Coming back to the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum, it was designed by Sir John W. Simpson and E.J. Milner Allen and opened in about 1901. It's built in a Spanish Baroque style in beautiful Lockabriggs red sandstone and includes a huge array of architectural sculptures, including a large statue of St Kentigern or St Mungo on the opposite side of the building. And that's where we head now, turning left off the Dumbarton Road to the car park at the rear of the building, which actually is the front of the building. You can actually enter on either side of the museum, but the car park is here and it's easy to park. Well, as I mentioned, as you enter, there's a large statue of St Kentigern, or St Mungo, Glasgow's patron saint, staring down upon you. You're now in the lower ground floor, where you'll find the toilets, exhibition area with shops and a lovely restaurant. climb the stairs to the next floor or take the lift and you come out onto a huge hall where the centrepiece is a concert pipe organ that's still played daily at 1 p.m. And to show you how big the hall is, it can seat 3,000 people, and there are always chairs put out for the daily recital of this wonderful musical instrument. The museum is divided into 2 sections with 22 galleries. On one side is the Life Gallery, displaying all museum pieces such as a full-sized World War I Spitfire aircraft, Egyptian sarcophagus, warriors' armour and ancient artefacts of early man's life in Scotland. On the other side is the Expressions Gallery, which includes the fine art collections from Rembrandt to Claude Monet, Van Gogh and also Scottish colourists in the Glasgow Boys. The pièce de résistance for me is the painting by Salvador Dali of Christ of St John on the Cross, an amazing painting. This museum and art gallery is a must on any visit to Glasgow, and like me, once you've seen it, you will want to go back. Well, we're going to depart Kelvingrove Art Gallery Museum now, and we're going to turn right out of the gallery onto Sauchiehall Street and quick right down Radnor Street, and you'll see the Isla Inn, which is famous for whiskies of that particular island, the Isla Inn. Get right onto Argyle Street, then Dumbarton Road to Partick Cross, and left onto Beath Street, and then you bear left over the expressway, which is the dual carriageway coming in and out of Glasgow. Take the next turning to the right and you will come to the Riverside Museum, which I mentioned replaced the Motor Transport Museum in Kelvin Hall. It's only about 5 to 10 minutes away from the Kelvingrove Art Gallery Museum. It was designed by the celebrated architect Zaha Hadid and opened in 2011. And to give Zaha her proper title, she was Dame Zaha Mohammed Hadid, DBE RA, an Iraqi-born architect, artist and designer. She is recognised as a key figure in the architecture of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. She was described by The Guardian as the Queen of Curves, and as you look at the front of the Riverside Museum, the front design is a curved sculpture which it's believed represents the winding curves of the River Clyde. With several awards and accolades to her name, she was also recognised by the 2013 Forbes list as one of the world's most powerful women, and it's certainly worth looking at some of the extraordinary buildings that she designed. Sadly, in 2016 she died of a heart attack, with some of her works still incomplete. Well, I'm delighted to say the Riverside Museum was complete and is a superbly designed building with an absolute treasure trove of transport memorabilia to investigate. The museum houses cars, steam engines, ship models and much more. And berthed right behind the museum, alongside the quay, is the sailing ship the Glen Lee, a steel-hulled 3-masted barque. On the 13th of December 1896, just 10 days after she was launched, she took her maiden voyage to Liverpool, and from there she took a general cargo to Portland, Oregon. For 23 years she traded as a bulk carrier under the Red Ensign via Cape of Good Hope to Australia, returning via Cape Horn. Get on board and get a great feel for life on a square-rigged sailing ship of the late 1800s. I brought my kids here a few times and it's certainly a fantastic day out, so something to think about when you're in Glasgow. Well, we'll leave now, and on leaving the Transport Museum, turn right onto the A814, and only 5 minutes later you'll arrive at the Scottish Event Campus. Indeed, you'll see the large letters SEC on the side of the first building on the right-hand side, and this is the SEC Centre, which offers 5 interconnected exhibition and event halls with a combined area of over 22,000 square metres. It is actually built on reclaimed land of the River Clyde, where the former Queen's Dock was filled in from the rubble of the demolished St Enoch railway station in 1982. Recycling? Love it. Well, the main building was opened in 1985 with a concert by the Royal Scottish National Orchestra in Hall No. 1. As you drive on, the next building on the right-hand side, which looks like an alien spacecraft with a huge curved dome on top, is the OVO Hydro, after its sponsor OVO Energy. It was actually modelled on a Greek-Roman amphitheatre. The designer also used translucent materials, and at night there are some lovely effects as the building seems to change colours. The arena, which seats about 12,500 people, was officially opened in 2013 with a concert by the wonderful Scottish singer Rod Stewart. Well, you'll turn right at the junction onto the Scottish Event Campus site, and as you do, on the left-hand side you'll see an amazing metal-looking building with holes in the sides. This is the multi-storey car park, and because of its strange design, is often referred to locally as the Cheese. Now straight ahead you'll see a massive metal girder built crane, and I'll talk about that shortly, but on the right hand side you'll see coming into view the third of the exhibition centres, and this is the SEC Armadillo, with seating capacity of around 3,000. Now, you'll see why it's called the Armadillo, as that is exactly what it looks like. You know, the same sort of design as the Sydney Opera House. OK, now turn into the SEC car park and do a quick loop and come back out onto the road and turn right towards the Clyde Arc Bridge. And just before you cross the bridge, on your right-hand side, you'll see this gigantic crane that I was talking about. This is the Finniston crane, and is a giant cantilever crane, and although it's no longer operational, it remains here as a symbol of the city's engineering heritage. The crane was used for loading cargo, in particular steam locomotives, onto ships to be exported around the world. And it's one of 4 similar cranes along the River Clyde, and one of only 11 giant cantilever cranes remaining in the world. During my naval career, I visited many countries around the world and was always intrigued and delighted by the sight of a steam locomotive with a brass plate declaring that the train had been built in Glasgow. Well, it's one of these cranes that would have loaded that train onto the ship that carried it halfway around the world. And there are still many steam trains operating today in some of the strangest corners of the world. Now, I know that my podcasts are listened to all over the world, so if you have a Scottish steam train in your area and do check the brass plate on the side of it, then please do get in touch and let me know, and perhaps send a photograph to my email at john@exclusivescottishvisits.co.uk. Well, just opposite the Finniston crane is a circular brick-built building called the Rotunda. It was, until recently, being used as a restaurant, but its original use is fascinating. And if you look across the River Clyde, you'll see a similar building, and these were connected by a tunnel under the river. You would actually enter the rotunda, and a large hydraulic lift would lower you into the shaft below to allow you to walk or drive to the other side, and be hoisted back up the lift shaft to exit at the other rotunda. They were opened in the 1890s and allowed pedestrians, horse and carts, and then cars to cross under the river, and they remained open for around 100 years, only closing to pedestrians and cars in about 1980. We'll continue on and you will arrive at the more modern method of crossing the river, and that is the Clyde Arc Bridge, or, as it's known locally, the Squinty Bridge, due to its 45-degree angle of crossing the river. You'll recall from my last podcast, episode 2, that we passed the Squiggly Bridge, a pedestrian bridge further up the river. Well, having crossed the river, we're now heading to Pacific Quay, and on the right-hand side you will see the City Media and Creative Industry Quarter. The first building has the letters STV on it. This is Scotland's television company, founded in 1957 by Canadian newspaper magnate Roy Thomson. The next glass-fronted building with the letters BBC is the British Broadcasting Corporation, and that's also television studios and was opened in 2007. Of course, the inventor of television was the Scottish inventor and electrical engineer John Logie Baird, who demonstrated the world's first mechanical television system on the 26th of January 1926. Television actually came to Scotland in 1952, and I'd be about 10 years old when we first saw a television in our house, and how exciting it was. I recall sitting watching Champion the Wonder Horse as a boy. I'm not sure how many of my listeners will remember that programme where Gene Autry was a singing cowboy whose companion was his horse, Champion. Lovely memories. Anyway, after you pass the BBC studios, turn right into the Glasgow Science Museum, which is made up of 3 titanium-covered buildings, which include the IMAX Film Theatre, a massive bulbous construction with a huge cinema screen inside, and the second building, which is called Slender Crescent, which has an interactive science exhibition hall. And from my experience with bringing the children here, it's an extremely popular centre with hundreds of interactive exhibits, and you will all understand me when I say that young boys in particular just love to touch things. Well, this is manna from heaven, and they can touch and play with nearly all the exhibits as long as they wish. The third structure is a tall tower with an observation deck on top. This is the Glasgow Tower that I mentioned earlier, and it stands around 415 feet high. It actually holds a Guinness World Record for being the tallest, fully rotating freestanding structure in the world, and that's because the whole structure can rotate all the way around, or 360 degrees. OK, we're going to leave the Science Centre now and retrace our steps over the Squinty Bridge, then turn right onto Lansfield Quay, along towards Anderston Quay, and if you continue straight on, you will pass under the M8 Kingston Bridge, built in about 1970, and that bridge takes the motorway that runs right through the centre of Glasgow, all the way to Edinburgh. Continue straight on and you're now in the Broomielaw area, which in the 19th century would have been one of the busiest and noisiest places in Glasgow, with cargo ships being loaded and unloaded and preparing to sail to all parts of the globe. And I'll touch more on the shipping of the Clyde in my next Glasgow podcast, which will be shipbuilding on the Clyde. As we continue along, we pass the Squiggly Bridge again on the right-hand side. And when we eventually reach King George IV Bridge, and it was actually named after King George who laid the memorial stone in 1927, we then turn left up Oswald Street. And as you turn, just look off to your right-hand side and you'll see the Caledonia Railway Bridge from 1899 that has 10 railway tracks running across the river, taking the trains into Glasgow. OK, we're now on Oswald Street and we continue on to Hope Street, which we were on in the first episode of my Glasgow tour, but this time we'll continue up to the end of Hope Street to come round on ourselves and eventually end up in George Square, our final destination. Oswald Street, like so many of Glasgow's streets, has historical connections. This street's named after Richard Oswald, who in the mid-1700s was a wealthy sugar and tobacco merchant and who, it has to be said, was involved in the slave trade. But he was active in other ways as well. For example, during the American Revolution, he served as an advisor to the North Ministry on trade regulations and the best way to respond to the American War of Independence. But he's probably best known for being one of the British peace commissioners who negotiated the Peace of Paris Treaty in 1782 that ended the American Revolutionary War. As you continue along this street, on the right-hand side you will see the Central Railway Station, built in 1879 for the Caledonia Railway Company. It was extended in 1899 to accommodate 13 platforms, and interestingly enough, I mentioned in episode 1 that you would find Queen Street Station in George Square. Now, why 2 stations? Well, this is because there's no railway route running directly through the city, which means that Glasgow Central feeds the south of Scotland and beyond, and Queen Street feeds the north. Well, within the Central Station is the Grand Central Station Hotel, which was originally the Caledonia Railway headquarters. And if you're staying, don't forget to try out the champagne bar and take a look at the domed ceiling and marble pillars. Fantastic. The hotel's claim to fame is that the first long-distance TV pictures were transmitted from here in 1927 by the inventor of television, John Logie Baird. Also in the past, the hotel has had guests such as John F. Kennedy, Frank Sinatra, and even Winston Churchill. Just outside the main door of the hotel, you'll see a bronze statue of a fireman in his fire suit and breathing apparatus. And this is called Citizen Firefighter, and it's a statue by Kenny Hunter, and it was put here in around 2001 in memory of the firemen who have lost their lives in Glasgow and the west of Scotland, and in particular in the 1960s Cheapside Docks fire, where tragically 19 firemen lost their lives. As an aside, it's worth mentioning that in October of 2001, more than 200 Glasgow firemen gathered here to pay tribute to the US firefighters killed in the Twin Towers tragedy of 9/11. And for me, this really strikes a chord, because on my recent visit to New York, I visited Ground Zero, the amazing memorial to the tragedy that struck New York that day, killing over 3,000 people. Staggeringly, 343 firefighters were among the dead. May they rest in peace. Well, we're now going to continue up Hope Street and follow for a short while the route we took in episode 1. But this time we'll cross St Vincent Street and also Bath Street, and then cross over the pedestrian precinct of Sauchiehall Street. Now, if you were on foot, you'd turn left up Sauchiehall Street, and on the left-hand side you'll find the wonderful willow tea rooms designed by Charles Rennie Mackintosh. Anyway, we're going to continue on, and slightly further on, at the junction with Rennie Street, on the left-hand corner of the road you'll find the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, an enormous brick building built in about 1987. The Academy was developed from the Glasgow Athenaeum, dating back to 1845. This is the first purpose-built conservatoire that trains singers, musicians and actors. And some of our most famous Scottish actors were trained here, including Tom Conti, Robert Carlyle, James McAvoy, and you'll all have heard of David Tennant, who played Doctor Who in the 10th incarnation from 2005 to 2010. Sheena Easton, the famous pop singer, she also trained here. Well, just a little further up Hope Street on the right-hand side is the Theatre Royal, and that's home to Scottish opera and ballet. It was opened in 1867 by James Bayliss, who ran a number of theatres across Glasgow. Initially it was named the Coliseum, then changed to the Theatre Royal in 1879. The building has a checkered history, having suffered extensive damage in 2 fires, but it was extensively refurbished in 1997, now has 4 floors, with a total capacity of over just 1,500 people. The theatre's home company is Scottish Opera, and is the largest performing arts organisation in the country. But the venue also presents ballet, drama and children's theatre. And I've just looked up the programme to see that The Merry Widow, an opera by Franz Lehár, is running from the end of the month. That's of course 2025. OK, we now turn right into Cowcaddens Road, and on the left-hand side you will see the National Piping Centre, which is housed in an old church. The centre was established in 1996 as the Centre of Excellence for the Study of the Great Highland Bagpipe. Can you believe that there are over 1,000 people per month who take lessons in bagpipes, and students have come from over 60 countries since its opening? It's a really lovely space, and I have to say that I had the privilege of being invited to one of their annual dinners, and that was once again by my good friend John Duthie. The centre itself's got an excellent museum, and it's worth a visit if you're in the area. And the patron to this worthy organisation? No other than King Charles III himself. Continue down Cowcaddens Road to the very end and turn right onto North Hanover Street. If you then continue to the end of the street, you will come back to George Square, where our tour first began. And that, my friends, is where the third episode of my tour of Glasgow ends. Over the 3 episodes, we've traversed Glasgow from George Square to the medieval quarter and down to the River Clyde. We've returned to the centre of the city to hear about the merchants who brought the wealth to Glasgow and across to the university sector before touring to the east side and down to the waterfront again, where an amazing revitalisation and rejuvenation is taking place. And all of this just as Glasgow celebrates its 850th birthday. Glasgow 850, as it's been heralded, is in full swing, and there's a year-long inclusive citywide programme of events and activities that reflect on how the city has transformed itself, particularly over the last 50 years, and how it can inspire accelerated change for a better, sustainable future. I actually just read that from one of their brochures. Well, during this year of Glasgow 850, I hope you've enjoyed this wee panoramic tour of central Glasgow. It's an amazing city with so much to offer. So different from Edinburgh, but a delightful place to spend a few days. And from one great city to another, much further than Edinburgh this time, I just have to mention New York, from where I've just returned, having attended Tartan Week. It's still a bit surreal that the first time that I visit the Big Apple, I don my kilt and march up 6th Avenue to the sound of bagpipes from a number of marching bands. It was spectacular, and to lead the 4,000 marchers, including 1,500 bagpipers, Highland dancers and Scottish Clan members, was our very own award-winning actor, Alan Cumming. Now, I marched with the American Scottish Foundation alongside the chairman Kenneth Donnelly and the president of ASF, Camilla Hellman. Well, what a great day. Rounded off by attending a show at Carnegie Hall called the Hoolie, which in Scots means a very noisy party or sing-along. We normally use the word hoolie to tell that there's a gale force wind blowing outside by saying, "It's blowing a hoolie." Anyway, it was a great evening. I was also delighted to meet 2 guests who toured with me last year, and these were Laurie Norris and Deborah Lang. Now, Laurie is a Big Apple greeter, so we were privileged to have a private tour of some of the skyscrapers in Midtown Manhattan. That evening, Laurie took me, Pam and Debs to the very prestigious University Club for dinner. What a treat, and thank you both for your excellent company. Well, as I said, this third episode is the final one of our panoramic tour of Glasgow, and to round it off, I'm going to give you a 4th podcast on a fascinating subject which allowed the wealth to literally flow into Glasgow and beyond into Scotland, and that is shipbuilding on the Clyde, where, incredibly, 25,000 ships were built from the late 18th century, which allowed Glasgow to become a powerhouse within the United Kingdom and the second city of the empire. But before I release that podcast, I'm going to publish a podcast on my own reflections following my trip to New York. It'll be my own thoughts and reflections and ideas, and I'll comment on all the main sites that I was able to visit and hopefully connect my thoughts with Scotland and look at the Scots that built this city, as well as thousands of other immigrants. So watch out for A Scotsman in New York in the coming weeks. Well, as always, I have thoroughly enjoyed bringing a part of Scotland to you. I always welcome feedback, so if you wish to comment on any of the areas we've visited today, or if you wish me to cover any aspect of Scottish life, then please do get in touch through the contact page on my website, or send an email to john@exclusivescottishvisits.co.uk. I'm also very pleased to have heard from many of you who've listened to the podcast, and it's always great to meet some of you personally. Please do keep your messages of support coming, and don't forget, if you do intend visiting Scotland and want the best experience with a guide, then get in touch to discuss the possibility of a tour with me in a luxury Mercedes. And if you don't want a formal guide, then perhaps one of my bespoke itineraries may help you plan a more spectacular holiday. Once again, get in touch through the website, Exclusive Scottish Visits, or email me directly. And if you've followed any of my tour routes, then do send a photograph, please, of you on that part of the trip, with your name, and I'll get it up on my social media site. And thank you so much to those of you who have bought me a coffee recently. And if you wish to contribute in a small way to these podcasts, then you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Unique Scotland. All contributions are much appreciated. And please do share these Unique Scotland podcasts with friends and family. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you all listening today, and I'd now like to sign off in traditional Scottish fashion by raising my glass with a wee dram to you, wherever you are in the world. Slán Java.
You've been listening to the Unique Scotland podcast with exclusivescottishvisits.co.uk. To receive all our episodes automatically, please subscribe now.